Just turn 4 o'clock. Not using that. Right, first of all, can you hear us online? Well, okay. Right, welcome to Economy and Infrastructure Service Transformation Committee. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Wendy Lewis.
Okay. 2 then is disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest. No, there aren't any. 3 then is to approve and sign the minutes of a previous meeting as a correct record. They're on pages 1 to 4. So they're page 1, 2, 3, and 4. Somebody move as a correct record. Okay, thanks. And then on to 4, active travel maintenance. Cabinet members want to say anything first? Or should I just pass them straight on, straight over?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to necessarily introduce the report. In fact, I'm here to the committee to hear the comments from yourself, Chair, and others of the committee on topics raised around active travel maintenance and stuff. So, as you are aware, Chair, and members aware, in Swansea we do have quite an ambitious active travel programme right across the board, with over almost 150 kilometres of active travel routes. So, I guess part of today is to find a way forward on a collaborative approach between highways and parks, which is why my colleague is beside me today, on what we're doing in terms of our active travel.
Yeah, there's we're probably leading the way in the amount of active travel routes. But to me, it is very important that maintenance is built into any schemes going forward, because as soon as anybody gets a complaint in their ward, the first thing people do normally is pick up the phone to head of parks and say, can somebody go out and clear the brambles overhanging hanging the route. And they will do their best to do it, but there is no specific maintenance budget fed in, because when we have a budget, all we get from Welsh Government is the money to put the route in, but not money to actually cut back where these routes have been put in. Well, you can imagine trying to upkeep 150 kilometres of active travel routes. It comes as you probably spend the entire parks budget just looking after those routes, and not looking after the parks, and especially when we've had years and years of budgets being cut because of the last government didn't put the money into local government that should have been put in, and then expecting to do a lot more for a lot less. And so therefore, I think that we need to have a policy that when we apply for active travel routes, that we make sure that there's a maintenance budget as well built into it, so that there's this sinking fund to make sure that we can upkeep those routes, because they can cause a lot of damage if you have brambles overhanging active travel routes. So,
yeah, thanks for that. Who's kicking this off? Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
I hope Robert hasn't taken your thunder, but
well, you've taken a bit of it, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. So yeah, my name is Stephen Williams. I'm an active travel officer working at Swansea Council. So just to take you through this report, which hopefully you've had a chance to read. There's a bit of a background information then. So the Welsh Government's 2013 Active Travel Act requires local authorities to continuously improve active travel infrastructure and to map existing infrastructure and plan out a future network for future delivery. As part of that process, then back in 2021, a public consultation exercise was carried out. and our future active travel network was mapped out. And that can be seen on Active Travel Network Map Wales, which is a website which everyone can view. So since 2018, the Welsh Government has established a fund called the Active Travel Fund, which local authorities can bid for funding from in order to deliver new active travel infrastructure. The purpose of that fund, its objectives are to encourage modal shift, that's away from a car to active travel, improve active travel access to employment, education and key services, and to connect communities. Excuse me. Since then, the Welsh Government has launched its transportation strategy, and that includes government targets to reduce car journeys in terms of miles driven from 2019 levels by 10% by 2030, and to increase active travel journeys from 27% to 33%. So as Councillor Stevens said, we've been quite successful in recent years in securing funding for new infrastructure. Last year, we received funding to install new or improved active travel infrastructure totaling 6 kilometres long. That was in Pontedilais and in Morriston, including Kingsbridge to Gravesend and some works in Mumbles. And the amount of funding that is available changes every year. It's set by the Welsh Government. As part of their funding, each local authority receives a guaranteed amount, irrespective of how successful their bids are. And that funding is based on a calculation that is due to the population and the area covered of that local authority. This money can be used to deliver minor works and some minor new facilities, such as cycle parking, and also to develop new schemes for delivery in future years, which can take quite a lot of effort and some years of development before they're in a position where you can bid for funding to actually construct them. However, the Active Travel Fund cannot be used for maintenance. So the costs of maintaining our network and anything that we build in the future must be met by each individual local authority. So this places additional pressure on the budgets of our Highways Maintenance Department and our Parks and Cleansing Department, who then carry out that maintenance. So each year we receive a lot of comments from the public about our network, and if there are problems such as overhanging branches or overgrowth, then that can lead to complaints. Those complaints either come directly to the Active Travel inbox, email inbox, or it comes via the council's report a problem function, or often that goes via councillors and on to us for action. So for the purpose of this report, requests for information were made to the group leader of Highway Maintenance and the group leader of the Parks Department to understand how that maintenance is carried out and what the challenges are. So for Highways Maintenance, currently only routes that are formally adopted are routinely inspected. All remaining routes are inspected on an ad hoc basis. Under the agreed existing procedures, only adopted routes will be maintained, and all new routes are to be adopted going forward. Only reactive maintenance is carried out, and that's due to a limited budget that is available. And the cost of maintenance has to be supplemented by other budgets. Although it is not currently possible to quantify exactly how much that is, the cost of maintaining routes has been steadily increasing year on year, and there is a concern over the medium-term outlook in funding those costs. So the cost of repairing a single incident of damage could consume the entire budget for repairs, for example. There's concerns over the risk of third-party claims against the council, which has happened previously if accidents happen due to substandard infrastructure. There's also increasing pressures to carry out winter maintenance, such as salting of cycle routes when conditions are icy. There's a request to consider the implications of new routes, the financial implications, and the extent to which new burdens on our maintenance departments will be incurred, such as drainage, fencing, supporting structures, etc. And that all new routes are adopted, and so to ensure that these are maintained, and that new routes are not installed on land that is not owned by the council. There's also a request that routes should be accessible to the infrastructure that are required to carry out maintenance, for example, 7.5 ton trucks, 7.5 ton trucks, if that infrastructure requires it. For parks and cleansing, again, unable to provide definitive costs without complete map of designated routes and those which are adopted and not adopted. However, it's estimated that £100,000 a year is spent on maintenance costs, which is rising year on year. Adopted active travel routes are currently maintained on a reactive basis, and that can lead to delays in addressing maintenance issues. And it can also lead to knock-on effects where if they have to deal with an urgent issue, then that can cause other scheduled works to be delayed, causing problems down the line. In 2014, a maintenance plan was established for adopted routes, and that was funded by the existing parks revenue budget. Any additional cost since then is funded on a best endeavour overtime basis, estimated at around £60,000 a year. Capital costs on equipment can be absorbed by the Parks Department, provided current capital funding for machinery replacement continues. And the future delivery of all new routes will put further pressure on existing budgets. In terms of cleansing works are carried out on a reactionary basis, absorbed within existing budgets. And again, another request for clear mapping and data to be provided to the Parks and Tree Services to establish accurate maintenance burdens. And again, a further request that no new routes should be on unadopted land. So to summarise, Swansea Council is required under the Active Travel Act to continuously improve active travel provision through securing new and improved active travel routes. The Active Travel Fund provides capital to develop and deliver new routes. However, the cost of maintaining those routes must be met by the local authority. Both highways maintenance and parks and cleansing have cited difficulties arising from inadequate mapping and categorising of routes, as well as the need for unadopted routes to be adopted. This is a piece of work that is yet to be done due to resource constraints, but is currently underway. The expansion of Swansea's active travel network places additional pressure on existing departmental budgets to maintain that network. Currently, there's no additional resources available, and any additional resources allocated to active travel maintenance would need to be accommodated from the budget that Cabinet recommends to Council in March 2025. And again, another request that maybe we need to look at estimating the additional cost of future maintenance when securing any new infrastructure going forward. So I'd invite councillors for their thoughts.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Anybody else want to? Before you come in, then Mark, no?
Could I just come in a second, please?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, no, just wanted to say yeah, thanks to Stephen and Matt and the entire active travel team for their work in pulling together the report here today and the work they're doing day in and day out with ensuring that our that we retain such an ambitious active travel and transport program as well. So.
yes, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and at last I've been able to read the report and hear from Cabinet members what the issue is, because every year all members must get the same, his emails, phone calls, whatever, saying, what about that path needs cutting back again? And I've never understood why, if we are reporting these things on a regular basis, that whichever department doesn't say, we need to add that to the list. And I can see now why, listening to the report and reading it, that there is no funding built in to maintain them. I mean, I enjoy the active travel routes. They're great to walk on, and they make the journey much easier. But just astounded to discover that we are not given the funding to maintain them. And I wonder where we go with that, and whichever get hold of the Welsh government and say, this needs sorting. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification. You mentioned obviously about no new routes should not be on an unadopted land. 3.7. Obviously, you need to perhaps amend that because it says should be on unadopted land.
Yeah, just
Okay. Just in case that gets picked up, this in the media or something. And also, Chair, in regards to obviously getting funding for this, does anybody like the outside agencies like NRW, will they perhaps and look to provide a grant, seeing as this is now going to be more and more coming into use in Swansea? And thirdly, for an example, really, what department actually picks up if there's any maintenance that's needed to be done? So if a branch of a tree grows out and lifts the path, now is that Parks going to pay for it or highways? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. If it involves any maintenance to hard surfaces, then it would be highways. I mean, we obviously within the grant applications, we do have the ability to bid for improvement money in inverted commas, so we can build in a certain sort of capital maintenance cost of the hard surfaces into that. So the issue to my mind seems to be the revenue cost associated with the staff required and the staff time to do it.
Yeah. Okay. I think the problem. Oh.
Yeah. And I think this is where the problem lies, is that we should be a one council approach, in that if somebody sees a problem, whether it should be the tarmac lifting because perhaps roots of trees have over the years, or whether brambles have come across it. We've had some high winds recently and trees have come down. Expect a response. But the difficulty is well sometimes accessing where they've come down the trees. So there's the point you made. And then it becomes an argument quite often. Myself and Councillor Stevens here, I will say, well, it's all well and good the parks being asked to look and maintain a lot more kilometres of it. And I would argue, I can always remember going back to the days of Yvonne Davis, when there was a director was saying, well, when we put an active travel route along the promenade, the miles of that active travel route would be added to the roads of, because it is a highway, to the amount of highway that should be maintained. So if we go 150 kilometres of active travel route, there should be an extra 150 miles or kilometres of highway that there should be a grant given for that. Now then, I got a long memory, and perhaps that might have happened during the day, but whether things have moved on and they don't give that money now, I don't know, to be honest. All I know was that a diminishing parks budget was always being asked to do more. And I want to see that wherever people ask for it, that we can respond. It's no good having an active travel route if it's getting overgrown. Many a time I would walk down to the football ground at the stadium from Beaufort Road and walk through the back there, and it seems overgrown. The active travel route seems to get narrower and narrower. It's not lit at night, and people trying to get to the football match. It's not adequate, and there needs to be an adequate regime built in so that we maintain these active travel routes, you know, if they put in, and that should be a regular inspection to make sure that people can get through there. Now that needs resources, and resources that neither department had probably got, but it's down to us when it comes to budget time. The only trouble is whenever we come to budget time, first and foremost, the social services will grab the most because of the problems that social services have, and an aging population always needs more. Education will always be foremost, and when you actually look at the cake, if you look at the budget, there's a cake being cut up, you know. When it comes to place, all the elements in the place budget, sometimes we scrapping around to pick up the crumbs, never mind a slice of that cake. But these are very important things to the people that we all represent. So I think if we can make the case to get more money in, there's, you know, everybody wants to see more active travel routes. I think actually the money that comes forward, they say is an active travel route to work when people go to apply for this. And yet I know we got a big tourism industry, and when people come here, over 40% of the people that visit Gower come here for cycling, and they want to cycle around Gower. So it is important that when they get here, that those routes are good accessibility to it. And so I don't think there's any debate between any of us that they're not welcome. The debate is how do we finance them, and how do we make sure that Welsh Government, or central government for that matter, recognise it. You know, there was a lot of money went to for a certain rail route in England, and it was classed as an England and Wales railway line, and yet not 1 centimetre touched Wales when that route was going to know. That meant that something over £1 billion was missed out to Wales. It's not unreasonable for us to ask for some of that money to come to Wales on what is an accessibility problem. You know, and if some of that money could come to Wales, then trickle down to the local authorities, especially those got active travel routes, so that we can actually maintain them better. You know, I think we all feel a bit embarrassed that we can't maintain them up to the satisfaction that we all require. But, you know, perhaps we can get a maintenance regime set in, and all of us must question, I think, in future, before we do any new routes or on anything we do, whether it's putting in a new square in somewhere, whether it's doing the Kingsway, whether it was doing Westway, are we building in a maintenance regime that's adequate for the needs of the people we represent? Because we can't keep telling people, well, yeah, we want to do it, but we've got no money. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a brief comment to my colleagues, to Councillor Francis Davis's response. Yeah, no, it's not necessarily a Swansea issue either. You know, I'm on the WLGA, and it is something that is coming up that within other local authorities in Wales, in the pressures with the additional infrastructure around active travel and like other things that Councillor Francis Davis said, and the trying to stretch those budgets so further to incorporate all that, and as he said, you know, we've got some fantastic active travel routes here, and hopefully we can find a way forward to ensure they're kept up to date and maintained. So.
Okay, thanks. I think the problem we have got is that we're getting so much money in to increase active travel, but if you go down the line 10 years down, they won't be there anyway because you're not doing any maintenance. So the secret is, how do we get the maintenance? We all know they need maintenance done on them, because what happens on active travel routes is even when the leaves come down, the cyclists find it dangerous. So, you know, maintenance has got to be done. The other thing that worries me is the mapping, because you've got unadopted. They've got to be identified, because they will deteriorate, I think, more than the adopted ones. And of course, the new ones that are coming along will be maintenance free up to a point for so many years. It's only the leaves, and if trees come down, that's when they'd be spent, because they're brand new. Because I've got some in my ward and they still look great now. So, but it's where do we get the maintenance? That's why this was set up. We all know we need the maintenance, but I know the answer is tell a cabinet member to go back to when it comes to setting out the budget, they got to fight for an extra budget, whether you ring fence active travel, because active travel is becoming important. And I think my argument with people is active travel is not just for bikes. It's for people. I've seen somebody who's visually impaired jogging because he's using the curb as a guideline, and people are saying that it's easier in wheelchairs, easier pushing baby with prams. So it's for the community. It's not just for bikes, which is the biggest argument that I get. Yep.
Thanks, Chair. I think that's part of the issue, the fact that it isn't just for bikes, because obviously, whilst like a shared use path doesn't have the same capital maintenance requirement as a carriageway, in terms of inspections, it's much more onerous because obviously pedestrians use it, intervention levels are that much lower. So once they're on the adopted network, the inspection requirements are much more onerous than a carriageway.
Just to echo that, obviously we've talked a lot about the costs, but just to re-emphasise the benefits of active travel infrastructure. As Councillor Francis Davis alluded to, cycle tourism is worth 40 billion euros a year in Europe. We've had a presentation by Sir Chris Whitty recently, who is England's Chief Medical Officer, talking about how active travel infrastructure is so important, and that by enabling the least active people to do some activity, we can save millions of GP visits every year, and which will save the NHS a lot of money. Some of our infrastructure we've put in has already had very significant local benefits. I think in Males Road, we've seen the serious accidents on Males Road drop substantially since we put that scheme in. One local authority estimated that each serious accident would cost £200,000 per year per accident. I think the part of the problem is that the benefits of active travel in reduced air pollution and better health and all the rest of it, those are societal benefits, but obviously the cost of it falls on the local authority. So it's how we square that circle.
But we still haven't said where we're going to get the money from. They made 40 billion, maybe they can give us $1 million just to do the maintenance, because without maintenance, then the life cycle drops. And the older it gets, the quicker it drops. And I think that's the main problem, because, well, Robert Francis Davis and myself are the same age, and we've seen how maintenance affects other areas, like footpaths, things you do in parks without maintenance, they're gone within 5 or 6 years, simply because there's no maintenance there. So we know that historically what lack of maintenance does to anything, and this is something that we want to keep going, not say, yeah, we've got active travel, but we've only got it for about 10 years. So that's I know it's a secret, but we've got to try and find the answers for that secret.
Thanks, Chair. If Chair, you and the members are willing, obviously we've presented a paper today which highlights what the issues are. The mapping exercise is ongoing at the moment. Perhaps we could bring a further paper to committee when we've then got definitive, this is how much it's going to cost to maintain, and some ideas then as to how we could look at maybe some inventive uses of our other income streams to ring fence to aid active travel maintenance.
Yeah, okay with that. And then, of course, we're going to ask the 2 cabinet members here to get some money from somewhere else to put on maintenance. The only thing about that, you got to rob off Peter to pay Paul, and that's the only problem you got.
Well, there's no magic money tree, and the thing is that unless central government, and they've got their problems with the money that they say they got to try and find. Welsh government are relying on the money that's going to come from central government to pass down to us. And I don't think it's ever going to get easier with the demands of social services, which are increasing year on year. I'm somebody who can't use an active travel route because I've been waiting 15 years to have new knees put in. I'd love to be able to get on the bike, but I wouldn't get to the end of the road. But I got COPD, and so on my lungs, I can't walk very far either, you know. So being able to get around is important. I went on holiday this year and I actually hired a mobility scooter to get around, which then made me realize the importance of dropped curbs and clear pavements. And you know, I'd probably recommend everybody, whether they need one or not, is to perhaps spend a day on a mobility scooter to see how important it is. Which then brings me to places like the seafront, and you know, we got a lovely promenade right the way around the bay. And we got a cycle, which is part cycle track, that's shared space between pedestrians. But on some ways, we built up the dunes now along the bay because of global warming, which has then created other problems where those dunes are now higher than the wall. The sand is blowing over the top and actually getting onto the paths, which means that if you're on a bike or on a wheelchair or somebody with pushing a buggy, it's very difficult to get around. And I got problem, you know, the problem is highways just can't go along and take the sand away because I think they can't put the sand back on the beach once because it's then contaminated. I don't know how much more it can get contaminated than it would be on the beach as well these days with the pollution in our seas. But it's this continuous cycle of problems, you know, and I know we're saying we're going to up for solutions, but trying to get more money from the budget, unless the budget in the first place is increased, is not going to be easy when, you know, nobody's going to want to close a home down. Nobody's going to want to close the school because their demands are getting greater all the time, you know, so it's something that we've got to look at, and government is saying, when you do it, we've got to build in the maintenance. And we're all guilty of it sometimes. It's like the maintenance budget gets cut sometimes first, and you can see it. And it's not just on the service on these paths, but other services. When you go into our parks and other open spaces, we've seen the demise built up of those areas over the years. So we, you know, I keep nagging on about it all the time, is that a maintenance budget is really, really important if we're going to make sure that we have adequate services. And the officers, we know, do their best with the budget they got. But there is a need to get it built in more. And the one council approach is good. Parks the other day said they couldn't get in access to cut some trees back. The leader, having a meeting with us, managed to get a new piece of machinery that they can go back to cut the trees back along those routes to keep it active. So one piece of machinery there made a huge difference. It was £60,000, I believe, the piece of machinery. But it was made it a life a lot easier to be able to keep these routes open. So sometimes one piece of machinery might save lots of other hours in trying to come up with a problem. So it's making sure we have the right adequate machinery to be able to do the job as well.
Can I just ask one more question where it says that new routes are not installed on unowned land? So can you explain that? Because if we compulsory purchase, is not then our land?
I think that in the past we have installed routes on land that we have leased rather than purchased. So I think that's may have caused some problems in the past and been able to adopt routes. However, so we're in the process of going through each route to see, is it adopted? If it hasn't been adopted, have we tried to adopt it? Have there been problems? What those problems are? I'm going to try and get to the bottom of each, and we'll hopefully come back to you in the future with a resolution. But I think that the general request from the parks and the highways department was to make sure that if we're installing a new path, it's on land that Swansea Council owns. Yes.
Right. Thanks for that. I did have something else that just disappeared when you said that. Yeah, so it's strange to find a way forward on this. The mapping is, I think, is important. I don't know how long that's going to take, because that'll distinguish between adopted and unadopted. Would it make the maintenance then become more clearer? So we got a definitive figure on maintenance.
Yeah, I think it would. In terms of a timeline, we're thinking it's going to take a couple of months, because obviously as part of the mapping process, we do the measurements of the widths and that kind of thing, and then there'll be an initial inspection of everything, so we can establish a baseline position.
Because what I think we want to do is say maintenance for active travel is X amount, and then you can fight for that. But if you just go and fight for your overall maintenance budget, I think that's more difficult. Because that's what you're doing now. You're spending your overall maintenance budget to maintain everything, which is whoever shouts the loudest gets the maintenance money.
Apologies, Chair. Councillor Thomas has patiently had his hand up for some time.
My excuse, Will, is I did ask Sam if you had your hand up, but she said no. And she said, whispered, it's nothing personal. Sorry about that, Will. I can't see your hand. I can't see your hand. And even when I look up there, there's something there. But, oh, yes, I can see it now. But Sam, I've got the same
No
eyesight as
problem.
me. Okay, Will, off you
No
go.
problem. Thanks. Yeah, sorry. And thanks, Councillor Stevens, for spotting me there. Yeah, just firstly, I mean, it's great to see Swansea's obviously clearly ambitious about the active travel. I think, as Robert said, we're definitely leading the way in Wales. It seems to be that we get a lot of schemes off the ground. Obviously, the Bishopston scheme has been pretty frustrating because that's a bit of a game changer. We spoke about the tourism sort of potential amount of tourism spend there is from cycling, which I think is really interesting one for Gower. And if that Bishopston scheme can go over to Southgate and then down to Park Mill, then that literally, as Robert said, opens up Gower to being explored all the way from Swansea. So I'd like to see, obviously we're not talking about the routes as such now, but I'd like to see that sort of Southgate to Bishopston scheme as a priority personally, because that sort of cycling tourism would be really great for the area, I think. When it comes to the maintenance, obviously Welsh Gov is pretty key here. However, I think there's an argument with some of the land and sites and commercial units that the council have and other potential commercial units. I'm thinking I think we own the Secret, and any catering units we have, like for example on the prom, which are going back in where the seawall is. And, you know, I'm sure if you looked at the network, there's loads of commercial sites that we get rent from. They benefit from the active travel infrastructure. So there's an argument to say that, you know, maybe corporate property should be putting some money into the maintenance of that, because the quality of the offering and the better the active travel offering, the more people that are going to come past those premises. So obviously maintaining those premises better. I think we could argue that some of that money could be spent on maintenance of those active travel maps. So just an idea there, really. One of my questions, one question, sorry, was obviously we've got the big schemes with active travel, but there never seems to be, and again, this is probably a Welsh Government funding issue, but the small schemes, for example, I'm thinking a pavement that stops 30 meters before it joins another pavement, and you know, no one ever knows why, or there's lots of things which would encourage people to get around a bit more. But there's obviously hard to find funding for those little schemes. I'm just wondering, is there any funding options for small schemes? You know, I'm thinking under 20 grand sort of schemes, little joining up paths and things like that. So that's the question and the idea. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, as this is just, we're talking about the maintenance side of it, Will. Maybe you want to email Andrew.
No, I could just add there, Chair. Matt or Stephen will correct me if I'm wrong in terms of that. There are small schemes that do take place as part of the Active Travel Fund that people may not actually realise are part of the Active Travel Fund. I can name a number. I know that there's been dropped accessibility curbs put in places to improve the general area. There's pathways being put in parks. There's there's quite a wide variety really that are outside of the specific active travel route. So those things do happen. Plus there is, Councillor Thomas, as you know, there is your community budget that could also improve with small schemes in your area that you have actually made use of in the past as well. So
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Just for an example, I know I can only talk about my own town because that's how I know. So in the park, there's an active travel route, but for people with visually impaired and in a wheelchair, they can actually go round the road, and part of the active travel was dropping all the pavements so that they could go round in a circle. So they cross roads, but they got the drop curves and then they can go right round, and that was part of the active travel grant. So it is around.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to expand on that, we generally for issues like the ones Councillor Thomas raised, we would package them up and as a group, and then we would request funding from the Active Travel Fund to deliver a package of small improvements, as we've done in the past. So the Active Travel Fund is a fund that can be bid from once a year. So this year, I think the deadline for bids is 20th of December. So over the next few weeks, we'll be putting our bids together. The amount of money that is available, well, we think is going to be available. We don't know yet. It hasn't been decided, but we think it will be reduced from last year. And within that, what they call a core allocation, so that each local authority gets a chunk of money based on population and area. Within that chunk of money, you are allowed to spend certain amounts on different things and the different categories. So we will be putting those bids together, but if any councillors have suggestions for sort of small interventions in their areas, they can send that to us, to the Active Travel inbox, and we can look at whether or not it's suitable to try and put a bid together for a package of minor works to deal with specific problems. But obviously that will be competing with other projects that we have ongoing, and so we don't exactly know if we'd be able to bid for that this year. But if you can send that through to us, then going forward we can create packages of works so that whenever funds come available, which does happen now and again, we can have this evidence base to say, look, we've got these 10 sites or 20 sites that need work, so can we use the money for that? So it'd be very helpful for any council to send details of any problems like that to us. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Just one more statement from me is that when you mentioned the third-party claims, well, if maintenance is not carried out, that's going to go up, in my view. Looking at 4.5, is saying we're mindful of maintenance costs when designing and planning new routes. So you put in maintenance cost that will occur on the new routes. If you are, why hasn't it been done to the old routes?
It's just being aware of potential maintenance costs rather than building them in. It's looking at through design how we could minimise the impact on maintenance budgets.
So really, maintenance-free active travel routes.
That'd be lovely, wouldn't it? But it's yeah, so
Okay.
looking at how we can minimise it.
I think the main thing that's come out of this is that we get the mapping done straight away. This then would sort of bring the maintenance costs to a light or to a head by doing that, because certain areas will need more maintenance than others because they're older. Don't mix any footpaths up with them, which does cost a lot of money. And then obviously the new routes, we will look at the maintenance side of it as well, to see if there's anything that's cheaper. Anything else that I've missed out? The cabinet members are going to look for more money in the maintenance side of it. And then we wait for the budget to see if anything comes out of it. So maybe the next time we meet, well, I don't know, it won't be this year that the map will be finished, will it? If it is, we'll come at the end of the year. If not, then it's up to the next year's STC to decide what the plans they will move forward.
I think the intention is that we won't be a million miles away by the end of the year. Needs to be done. Needs to be done.
Right. Any more questions or anything? Okay. Thank you very much. That was very good. Although we didn't get any money for you, but. Okay, thank you. Just moving on to the work plan. We're back with highways again next month, or the next 6 weeks. Highways asset management plan. So that's back with Mark. You've got to arrange that, or I'll give you a ring in between. Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much all for attending.
Thank you, Chair.